Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dani, and today I want to talk about the Read-EH-THON. I want to both recommend books and build a small TBR maybe. The Read-EH-THON is a readathon all celebrating Canada and Canadian authors and Canadian publishers, and it's organized by a bunch of awesome booktubers. I'm gonna link all the details of this readathon in the description of this video, so you should check that out. This readathon is going to happen from the 3rd to the 9th of August. They made a really cool bingo board that you can follow to participate in the readathon. But I'm not sure how I'm gonna fit the books that I have in there, but I want to read Canadian authors and Canadian stories. So I made here a pile of all the books that I have that were written by Canadian authors, and I want to go through each of them and recommend the ones that I've read and potentially put the ones that I haven't read on my TBR, but also show you some other options that if these books that I haven't read yet also interest you, you can also add to your TBR. The first author that I want to share, and it's one of my all-time favorite authors, is Sylvain Novell. He is from Quebec. He has 4 books out, I think, so far. I don't own the first one in this series, but I've read all of it. So this is the Thieves Files series. This is a sci-fi series that have gorgeous covers, first of all. And this is about giant alien robots. I really recommend that if you want just something fun and exciting and just have a good time. They're written in like files format. It's not like super crazy formatting, but it's files and interviews, so it goes really fast, and the audiobooks are narrated by a full cast, so I really recommend it as well. If you have access to those audiobooks, I really recommend it. And this whole trilogy is amazing. The first one is called Sleeping Giants, then the second is Waking Gods, and the third is Only Human. The other book that I have by his is a very tiny book that is great for a readathon because you can read this in one sitting. It's called The Test, and it's about a man who's taking a British citizenship exam. And things start not going really normally in the exam. Can't say much more than that. It's a very, very short book. It has 104 pages, so I really recommend you check this out. If you like Black Mirror, I think you will really enjoy this one. He also has a book coming out next year in February, I think, called The History of What Comes Next, and I'm so excited for it. I can't wait. I'm going to read it as soon as it is released if I can't get an arc of it. The next author that I want to share, I also really loved both of the books that I've read by her, and I have one that I haven't read yet, is Cheryl Lupina. I read An Unwanted Guest and The Couple Next Door. They're both thrillers. This is more like a domestic thriller. This is closed environment thriller. They're all stuck in a hotel and a murder happens. And this couple goes next door for a dinner and their baby is kidnapped. And I really, really loved both of these, especially An Unwanted Guest was my favorite that I read by her so far. It has, for me, had a very Agatha Christie vibe, and it's just like a cozy mystery, but at the same time, very intense. And this one is a book that kept me thrilled throughout the whole book. It just never stopped. So I really, really loved it. I didn't like the last 2 pages of it, but I'm just ignoring it. So if it wasn't for those 2 pages, it would be a 5 stars for me. And this was a 5 stars for me. And I'm gonna share another one later when I'm talking about the books that I haven't read yet. This book I hated, and I wouldn't recommend if you have the same taste in books as me, but if you don't, this is 7 Days by Senecal. I buddy read this with my work book club, and other people enjoyed it much more than me, which wouldn't be hard because I really didn't like this book. But this is about a man who kidnaps a man who murdered his daughter and tortures him, and it's very graphic, and it has some things here that I just couldn't agree and understand, and I really didn't like it. But if you want a horror, like a really graphic torture horror story, you could pick this up for the readathon. It's short, so it's very fast to read. This author is also from Quebec, and Cheryl Lupina, I forgot to say, but let me see where she is from. She lives in Toronto. One of the prompts for the readathon is to read a book set in a province or territory that you have been to and one that you haven't been to. So this is set in Montreal and like around this area, so all Quebec. This, I'm not sure. I don't remember if they're specifically stated where they happen. They get snowed in a hotel, so a lot of snow. So places that have a lot of snow, probably Quebec. The next book that I really recommend is The Marrow Thieves by Shahidi Malin. She is part of an indigenous community, and she even says that she is not a Canadian author, she's an indigenous author. So I think this has a very important perspective that we don't see a lot of. And this tells a story of an indigenous community where people are being kidnapped and killed because the other white people in the country or in the world have lost the ability to dream, but these communities still have that abilities and they believe that it's in their bone marrow. So they're killing the indigenous people for their bone marrow. This is a very character-driven story and it has some amazing explorations of these communities and the individual stories of these characters. I really recommend if you're looking for something like that. And it is one of the prompts for the readathon to read a book by an indigenous author, and I really recommend this author. I bought this book because I saw her speaking in an event that I went to last year, and her passion, just talking about it, talking about her work, is just so strong. You can feel it so much that I just had to get it, and she signed, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read her other books. And the last book's an author that I want to recommend that I've already read, and again, it's one of my favorite fantasy stories that I read last year, is Nikki Poparetto with Crown of Feathers trilogy. The first and the second book are already out, Crown of Feathers and Heart of Flames, and especially Crown of Feathers was one of my favorite fantasy stories, again, that I read last year, and I really recommend it so much. It's about Phoenix Riders. They're these two sisters who split up in the beginning of the novel because of belief differences, and one goes to be a Phoenix Rider and the other wants to do some pretty questionable things. There's some amazing characters here, some amazing actions, so much backstory and world building in these books, and I really think you should pick it up if you want a cool YA fantasy to read. The covers are also so beautiful. And the next book's coming out next year, which is going to wrap up this trilogy. I think you could totally read Crown of Feathers if you haven't read yet in the readathon in a week, because it's a very fast-paced book and it's just a lot of fun. So now let's talk about the books that I could potentially read for the readathon because I haven't read yet, and that could also inspire you. So the first one is A Stranger in the House by Cheryl Lupina. This is, like I said, is the third book that I have by her that I haven't read yet, and I loved so much the other two that I'm really curious to read this one. This is again a thriller, and it tells the story of a woman who I just read from the back here, and I don't want to know much more than this, but she gets a phone call saying that her husband was in an accident, and some people, the police maybe, think that she's involved in that accident, but she knows that someone got in her house and moved things, so now she doesn't know what to believe, who to believe, and I don't know what's going on. I'm curious, I want to know. The next book that I could read for the readathon is Linger by Sebastian de Castel. He is again from Montreal. I've heard this book mentioned especially by Jade from JD Ray Reads. She loves this author so much and everything that he ever wrote. And I bought this last year because it was a group book for one readathon that I forgot, but I ended up not reading it. And I'm really curious. This is definitely a contender for me to read in the readathon because I really trust her taste overall, and she makes it sound so much fun. This is about a boy who has to pass some magic exams to become a spellcaster, but his magic doesn't work, and then he has to go and try to restore his magic. The next one I have is A Woman Alone by Nina Loring. She is again from Montreal. I have a lot of authors from Montreal just by accident. If you don't know, I live in Montreal now. I'm from Brazil, but I moved here, and it just happens that I have a lot of authors from Montreal in my bookshelf. This is about a woman who lives in a very technological house, like a smart home that has a lot of smart app things connected, and she feels like someone is spying on her, and no one believes her, and we go from there. Again, this is a thriller. We shouldn't know much more than this. Anyway, this is a very recent release. It was published at the end of June, So I'm very curious to read it. And a thriller is always good for readathon, so that's a good option. The next one I have was one of the first books that I bought when I moved to Canada, and I have tried to read it maybe 3 times and I just can't, and it's tiny. And this is a poetry collection, or a satire verse poetry collection. This is a compilation of satirical verse poems that were part of a competition, like a contest for poetry in 1990. And the foreword is by Margaret Atwood, so that's what made me more curious to buy it. It was like 50 cents, I think, in a library book sale. So I picked it up because it was about Canada. It has like political, social, cultural poems that I was curious to read, but I don't understand anything that's in here. It's like, it's satirical, so it's making a commentary on things that were happening in the year that I was born. So I really don't understand the references that are here. So the poems are not funny to me, they're not interesting, they're not informative, because I don't have the context around it. And it has a very low rating on Goodreads also, but I don't know, it's just poetry. It shouldn't be that hard to finish, but you'd be surprised. It has some cool illustrations. Ooh, Montreal. Yeah, this has a lot of authors all from around Canada. It's called Canadian Venomous Verse. If you read it, let me know. I could try to read it again, but it's really hard. And the last author that I found on my bookshelf that's Canadian, that I haven't read yet, that I'm interested in reading. And if you watch my m&ms TBR, you know that the m&ms are really eager for me to read this series. It's Kristen Ciccarelli. The first book is The Last Namsara, and then we have The Caged Queen. I have both of this. The last one I think was already published, but I don't have it yet. I haven't read the first one yet. And this is a YA fantasy about dragons and stories, and I think the stories lure dragons and then people have to slay the dragons. I started this book at some point and I didn't continue. It was a lot of fun, I just was not in the mood at the time, but I really want to pick this up. And if the m&ms want me so much to read this book, I might in the readathon. But this is a very, very good option for me to read for this. Then I could continue the series and buy the last one because I love this cover so much. They're so shiny. And this author is from Ontario. Of course, the books are set in a fantasy land, so you can't use it for a province that you've been to or that you haven't been to. That's it. Let me know which of these books you think I should read for the readathon. And if you're participating in what you're going to read, I could pick more books up by August. So if you recommend me something that I really, really should read, I could pick that up. Just let me know. Remember to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for joining me. Bye.